Welcome back to Digital Businesses series, Ahead of the Curve Business Talks. My name is Jaren Lewis and I'm delighted to be your host. Ahead of the Curve is a show for ambitious business professionals who want to keep up to date with what's happening in the business world, get more out of their businesses, and stay ahead of their competition. I'm going to be coming to you right here every month as we explore what it takes to build a successful company. That is, you guessed it, always ahead of the curve. Now this month, our topic of choice is e-commerce, the business game changer. Today we have two very special guests with us, but before I introduce them to you, let's take a moment to have a quick look at the e-commerce landscape, which is most definitely on the rise. In 2021, over 2.14 billion people worldwide were expected to buy goods and services online. Not only that, but online sales accounted for 14.1% of all retail sales worldwide in 2019. This figure is expected to reach 22% in 2023. And if you need any more convincing, it is predicted that 95% of retail purchases will be made online by 2040. So, if you're looking to grow your business, e-commerce is definitely worth considering. We have two experts in the e-commerce realm for you today, speaking on different aspects of e-commerce. Firstly, we want to look at how we build it. How do we ensure we have the right solution for our needs? We'll be talking to Christopher Vassell, who is the Global E-commerce User Experience Specialist at Digicel Group. He will give us insights on how to approach your e-commerce project, including tips, tricks, and best practices. And secondly, we're going to explore how we go about promoting our digital purchasing experiences to reach our specific audience. Tonette Williams, e-commerce media expert from Trend Media, will be telling us how to promote our e-commerce solution, engage, and gain our audience in the most efficient way. She has extensive experience in helping businesses to promote their e-commerce channels so that they become digital marketing success stories. So let's start with how to build it with Chris Vassell. Chris, welcome to the show, man. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So I know you've got a lot of experience with building e-commerce websites and that kind of thing. And I'm really curious to know, what would you say, as someone who's done this before, are the core elements of e-commerce?
Well, e-commerce has different factors that go into it. Of course, I'd say one of the first things you look at is your CMS. Like, what are you going to build it on? What is your scale? With much like anything, you have different solutions based on the size of your business. If you're going for if you're a smaller shop, a smaller outfit, your CMS will be determined by that as well. If you're a big enterprise, then you're going to look for a big enterprise solution. So your CMS is definitely your first thing that you look at, right? And in the Caribbean, one issue that we have, one of the biggest issues we have is our payment processing, right? Distrust in the Caribbean, and most of the payment processors being from the larger territories. Payment processing is one of the biggest issues that we have here. So that's something that you need to take into account. And two other things, I'd say fulfillment is one thing that's like an issue here as well. You need to know how exactly you're going to get your goods out to your customers. If you're touting delivery to the home, how are you going to make that happen? Are you going to work with a FedEx? Are you going to work with a TT Post if you're in Trinidad, etc.? All right. And really, and lastly, and probably the first thing that you really look at is your goals, right? Your goals would determine and possibly clear the way for every other aspect that you're going to pull into this. So it's really a rounded type of response. Like, everything kind of plugs into everything. Everything is an input for another thing. So you have to look at it in a holistic way. But those are like the key things that you need to think of off the bat.
Right, brilliant. So, I mean, there are obviously some companies that have e-commerce platforms within the region. Can you maybe think of two companies that do this very well?
All right. Now, I'm going to sound very unpopular for this response, right? Now, the Caribbean has I'd say there are a few companies that really are trying to get e-commerce right, but a lot of companies have a far way to go. The Caribbean is in its infancy when it comes to e-commerce, and I could really only point to one, well, two, of course. Digicel, the Bigger Better Network, first one, of course, yeah, not because they pay my checks, and secondly, Massy. I really like in the pandemic, Massy really got their hands into this e-commerce projects, and they rolled out a few alternatives over the markets that they're running through. You have curbside pickup, delivery to the home, and their CMS, the way the look and feel, the user journey is pretty smooth. So I'd say Massy stores and Digicel, but there's so much room. There's so many. I mean, there are a few ones that started up. There's Jangora that started up that didn't work out in Jamaica. It's still live, but I don't know how heavy the traffic is to that side. There's Red Barrel that tried and failed. There's so many startups that really tried to push the envelope, but just never made it over that hump. But Massey for sure, still going.
Right, and it's interesting that you mentioned Massey because I've followed their journey as well. What I will say as someone who interacts with e-commerce platforms, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers would agree, is that e-commerce tends to feel a little bit impersonal. So how important is the user experience with an e-commerce
Oh,
platform?
extremely. Your user experience is how you're stepping the user, your end user through the process, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure you guys use, the Amazons of the world and the bigger players. So much research and development has gone into one keystroke, one button click, even the colors that they use over there. So much research. I think they said that the color yellow or the mustard color that they use at Amazon, that prompts the user over two more times for them to convert. Just a color, right? So user experience, very important. I don't want to feel like you don't know me, right? When I come into your store, especially if I have an account with your store, you should know my transaction history. You should know what I already bought. You should know what my likes are. You should greet me by name. Hey, Chris, such and such and such. We noticed you bought this the last time. Do you want to upsell to this? Do you want to upsell to that? Etc. etc. User journey. You want to lead the user to their goal in the least number of clicks possible. We don't need 10 clicks. We need 3, right? Get me to what I want. I'll pay for it and I'll choose how I'm gonna get my good or service. And that's it. Get me through in the funnel and out the funnel as quick as possible. The more steps there is the more people fall off along the way and the more, of course, unsuccessful your store will be. So user journey, you have to walk the users through in the best possible way. The problem with a lot of these people that are doing e-commerce is there's not a lot of research done into what your audience is and how exactly your audience wants to be sold to. Right? Problem is we do it the other side in. We just do a solution, give it to the users and say, hey, all right, cool. Let's see how they interact with it when it really should be done the other way around. So it's stuff like that we're just a little behind on. And I know that, especially with the pandemic that happened and us being a bit, being locked down and, needing to get goods and services, e-commerce is the thing that popped up on everybody's radar all of a sudden. And I wouldn't say pandemic is cooling down, but in the aftermath of those spikes that happened, companies are still on that trajectory to get e-commerce as being, part of the culture.
Absolutely. And I mean, like you said, it was the first thing to pop up on everybody's radar. And it's because the benefits to e-commerce are touted to be so vast, right? But if we dig into those benefits just a little bit, what maybe 5 specific benefits do you think would be most appealing to a business who's looking to start down that journey?
Man, you're giving me all of those exam questions. Give me 5 answers. I'd say, well, e-commerce is operating in a digital environment, right? Now, in the Caribbean, I don't really like when we purport the Caribbean as one block, which it is. But each market has their own nuances, has their own issues, has their own,
Quite right.
credit card penetration. So you can't kind of group them all into one. But across the board, right, there already exists a large subset of customers that are already transacting online, albeit Amazon, whoever, whoever has the means to do so is already doing so, right? And if we want to deliver convenience to them, we need to then capitalize on that subset of the market. So first advantage is grabbing a piece of that market that already exists. We have a million people that shop on Amazon. I think it's in the billions. Now, let's get some of that, right? Let's get some of that cake from Amazon. So that's the first one. Secondly, I'd say to me, it's just a whole nother channel. We have companies that have been operating brick and mortar for years, right? How do we shake it up? How do we keep ourselves uncomfortable? How do we grow? Let's open up our lines to another channel. Let's get more people in the funnel. Let's get uncomfortable. I'm tired of companies just sitting by their laurels, resting on their laurels for years and not wanting to do anything outside of what they're comfortable with, right? And I think probably one of the most beneficial things is targeting, ads, media, marketing. Now with e-commerce, you get the opportunity to build an audience, right? From visitors to the site, whether it's paid ads, whether it's your organic ads, your search ads, whatever. But once you start to build an audience, you could then say, okay, this is the pool of people that are transacting on my store. Let me get a lookalike group like this and try and get more people into my store. So your targeting becomes a lot more stricter, it gets a lot more rigid, and you get to optimize your spend a lot more. Oftentimes you spend big budgets on marketing and you don't even know who's seeing it. You don't have no idea how many people are converting off your ads from a billboard. How are you going to track a billboard traction? You know what I mean? So really, when I do a PPC campaign, or when I do an ad or a Facebook ad, or whatever the case is, when somebody comes in and convert, I can see directly. I could put a number to my conversions, and I can attribute that to the spend that was done on this side. So I think your marketing spend, your all of that, the ads, and how exactly you communicate with your customers that interact with you on an e-commerce basis, gives us innumerable benefits in terms of how you optimize your marketing spend.
So I think the benefits to the business are very clear after you've just explained them. But I want to talk about the other side of that a little bit, Chris. Do you see e-commerce providing benefit to the wider society in general?
Of course, of course. Without a doubt. And even just from basic econ knowledge, right? Knowledge, I should say. Mr. Brian Wilmots. Just from the basic knowledge, really, your aggregate demand is just a collection of all the demand throughout, right? More buyers, more sellers in the marketplace contribute to that. So, with e-commerce opening up so many doors, so many opportunities for people in our country. The more people hopping in, the more people buying online, the more people selling online, that pushes the agenda on our digital economy, and that is valuable. That pushes the country forward, of course. So that's one piece. Secondly, where countries, and I said before about bundling all the Caribbean together, countries that have unemployment issues, right? Get online. There's so many easy ways for people to make money online. It's ridiculous how much money is there on the table, right? So for those people that have issues, getting a job, holding down a job, whatever, this is an opportunity for them to also get some skin in the game, and really trying to survive. So it helps with our unemployment. It helps overall with the digital economy and our aggregate demand and our modernization. Right now I feel like we're still stuck trying to get our mind around Web 2.0, buying and selling commerce online. And really, the world is moving on to 3.0, right? So it's also about pushing the envelope on the digital side of the world, right? So, yeah, just overall for the country, there are numerous benefits there, and those are two.
Right. And then I think I'll leave it after this question, Chris. But what do you think are the first three things that a business should think about when they're going down this path of starting an e-commerce platform?
Well, I would say the first thing is to be patient, right? First thing is to know that this e-commerce doesn't pick up overnight, right? Especially depending on which market you're in. If your credit card penetration is low in the market, just know that it's going to be a rocky road to get everybody to adapt. There's also a big culture thing of distrust in the Caribbean, not easily hurdled. So slow, be patient, and there's two words that a company needs to get in tune with. It's authority and trust. Those are the two things that really sell a new store to our customers. If they don't trust you, they won't buy from you. If your pages load slow, they won't buy, right? If you have a bad experience one time, you've lost that customer forever. So just be patient. Ensure that you deliver a product that makes sense, a product that is well thought out, well researched. Be patient. All right, that's one. Two, what are your goals? As a company, you have to know what your goal is before you, of course, embark on any type of investment, right? What do we want to do, right? I don't know. Say, for instance, business A is working, already works in the retail space, has a brick and mortar, and you want to increase sales by X amount, right? With that goal in mind, that will inform how we go about doing e-commerce. Are we going to start with a smaller scale version of it? Are we going to go big? Like, what are we doing to get to that goal? Right? So it always starts with your goals for your companies, right? And I think lastly, coming from your goals and coming from the size of a company you are, you have to pick your solution, right? What's the solution you're gonna pick, and how do I make that decision? It's all based on your goals, the size of the company. So, for instance, we have influencer A, right? And I want to make it as real as possible. You're an influencer. You have 60,000 followers on social media. You're doing your thing. You have a wide audience. You want, as a passion of yours, you want to sell fragrances, right? For that person, I would say, hey, get on Big Cartel. Big Cartel is a very easy to use CMS. The payment processor is built in, so you don't have to worry about that mess. And you can interact through PayPal in terms of sending funds back and forth, right? You could use a very, very simple payment processor to get that started. Oftentimes we chase perfection when really we need to just get going, right? So it depends on what your goal is, depends on how far along you are, what your scale is. And that influencer could go on to, start, getting some transactions and getting some conversions going. And then maybe bump it up to a Shopify. Who knows? If you're a large enterprise, you're looking at probably like a Magento. So, picking your CMS, picking your platform is very important also when it comes to that. I hope I answered the question.
You definitely did. I think this has been a fantastic interview. I really appreciate some of the insights you've given here. I know I've learned a lot, and our viewers have as well.
I hope you guys have me on again.
I can't wait until that time. Thanks so much. Take care.
No problem, man. Thanks for having me, guys.
We've just heard from Christopher on how to build your e-commerce platform. And now I'm excited to talk to Tonette about how to promote your e-commerce platform. Tonette, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Tonette, we just spoke to Chris a little bit about building an e-commerce platform, right? And I'm curious to pick your brain just a little bit on how we would promote that after we have it set up. So can you tell me, just to start off with, what would you say are the major differences between traditional commerce and e-commerce and promoting those platforms?
Okay, so the major difference when you're looking at traditional commerce and e-commerce, for the first point is that e-commerce would be electronic commercial activities. So that is doing your commercial activities, trading online through electronic medium. So you'd be looking at the internet to do your advertising, to do your setup of your e-commerce business. And pretty much when you look at some of the differences, you would be looking at the accessibility and the availability. What that means is that e-commerce never sleeps, where traditional commerce businesses would traditionally open 7 days for the week, and it's not necessarily easy to justify a 24-hour day. But when you look at e-commerce, you can pretty much open 24 hours, and you can shop online. And for those people who are busy during the work days, they can shop in the nights. So accessibility, availability, that's definitely one. You would also look at the reach. When you look at e-commerce, e-commerce can be global. And what that means is once you've implemented the right supply channel, and the e-commerce company can pretty much market to persons who are not necessarily in their geographic space. But you could have a company in New Zealand who would be marketing or selling products to a person in Jamaica or a person in Canada. So there's no trade limitations. And another main difference between traditional commerce and e-commerce, that would be real-time efficiencies. With e-commerce, at the press of a button, business owners, they are able to react to the marketing conditions, as where traditional commerce then definitely takes some time, some delays in adjusting to the changing market. So when you really look at e-commerce versus traditional commerce, those are some of the differences. There are some similarities too, but those are the major differences that you want to look at.
Right. And so it sounds like this really offers the opportunity for rapid growth and expansion. And I think maybe someone setting up an e-commerce platform that may be slightly successful, it's kind of easy to get caught up in that success. But what I want to know is, how do I know if my e-commerce platform is actually successful? Are there any KPIs that I should be tracking or measuring in order to determine the success of that platform?
Absolutely. That's really a good question. When you're looking at measuring your e-commerce business, some of the things you want to look at is, for e-commerce, it's ultimately about your revenue, generating your revenue. And in this regard, your ROI, that's your return on investment, this becomes at the forefront of your KPI for your business. You definitely want to look at how you would be investing and promoting your e-commerce platform, looking at things such as your SEO strategy, looking at the different types of advertising that you'd be doing versus your revenue that you're generating. And you also want to look at your conversion rate. That's very important, because oftentimes you would want to optimize your conversion rate so you are getting more from your spend. And the beauty about digital is that you can easily track and monitor the activities on your platform that can help you to measure your conversion rate. And also you could look at some other indicators, such as your click-through. How many people are coming onto your website? What is that tracking looking like? How much are you spending for the different types of promotional strategies that you're doing, to measure whether or not your business is being effective online. Well, just before we close out, I could also talk about your bounce rate, because that's also important too. And you can use different strategies like Google Analytics that can help you to check to see how many people would have jumped onto your e-commerce site, how many people would have left without checking out, because of course that's pretty important. The user journey there would also be instrumental to tell you whether or not your bounce rate is too high, and based on it being high, at what point are the customers leaving your site. Another thing that you definitely want to look at is how much data you're collecting. Data collection is very important in your business. You definitely want to ensure that you're collecting, whether it's contact information, your emails, your contact numbers, so that you have your first party data. people that you can continue to speak to on a monthly basis, a weekly basis, and you can start creating and building that relationship with your customers.
So you mentioned something there that I want us to expand on just a little more. You mentioned promotional strategy. And I'm keen to understand, as part of that promotional strategy, how important is it to understand one, your niche, and two, your competitors in developing that strategy?
Oh, I really love the fact that you mentioned niche, because when you are thinking about doing an online business, you want to ensure that you are not necessarily marketing to everyone, especially for those small companies. You can't speak to everyone all the time. So you certainly want to be an expert in the field. So you want to create your own niche, your own value selling proposition, so that when you are out there in the marketplace, even if your pricing is a little bit more than some of the big players in the market, then your customers would still be coming in your direction because you are considered an expert in your field. So when you're looking at creating your niche, it is important that you look at the message that you're communicating and your marketing strategy. You're looking at your price, you're looking at your delivery time, you're looking at your user experience, etc. And also, you certainly want to have a clear understanding of who your target audience is, and that will help you to communicate more effectively with your market. Once we speak about, who your customers are, definitely an understanding that the persons who are there in the marketplace, they're not only looking at your solutions, but they're also looking at solutions from your competitors. And having an understanding of who your competitors are and what they're doing online, it is very vital to your business. The good thing is that with e-commerce, you are able to change and adapt in real time. So once you're looking at what your competitors are doing online, looking at their activities, looking at even their e-commerce site and what their cart looks like, how easy it is for them to move from one page to another. Some of these things you can also replicate and even do better. You can literally leverage your own e-commerce platform to function more efficiently than your competitors.
Right, and I think once you have that sorted, what I'm
Mhm.
curious to understand is how then do I get people into my e-commerce store? How do I draw them in?
Absolutely, because guess what? You have your product and it's a very good product. But if nobody knows about your product, then you're going to be stuck with your product. So you certainly want to utilize some strategies to ensure that you are selling your products online and you're doing good business so that you can increase your revenue. So like most traditional businesses, having an effective marketing strategy, this would definitely be the key to your e-commerce strategy. You can have the best product, but of course, you have to find the areas where you're going to be promoting your product so that individuals will be coming to your site and making purchases. Some of the key strategies that you would want to include, you'd want to ensure that your social media is up and running, creating creative content, not just advertising, but also creating content that would interest your buyers. You want to ensure that your search engine optimization is up to standard. And of course, we always recommend here at Trend that you include digital advertising in your marketing strategy. What we find is that once you are doing your advertising online in the online spaces, it's pretty easy for them to track what's happening. It's pretty easy for the company to track what's happening and to get more business. Even incorporating some, whether it's giveaways, you could do giveaways, you could do free shipping, different things that would attract persons coming to your e-commerce business and actually staying there, purchasing your product and coming time and time again, becoming a loyal customer. So those are some of the things that you would certainly want to look at in terms of, getting people coming to your store. I also want to recommend too that once, if it is that you decide that you're going to be advertising online in whatever space it is, once someone would see your product branding and click onto it, ensure that they are being trafficked to the correct place, the place relevant to that product that they would have been interested in. Oftentimes, the e-commerce site would send them probably to the homepage. And what that would do is that would increase your bounce rate. So you also want to look at the flow of your marketing. That's pretty important in this e-commerce road.
Right. Now, I know we're chatting about it here, and I know a lot of our viewers are probably sitting here and wondering, what does it cost to get an e-commerce platform up and running for my business?
That is a good question, and that usually is the number one question, even before they start asking about the integral parts of getting that e-commerce site up and running. But when you look at the cost of an e-commerce business, I usually would say is that no two businesses are the same. And basically, if you have a small business, your needs would be far less than if you had a medium-sized or a large company that's looking to go online. So what that would mean is that you would have possibly a smaller business that would be tapping into an e-commerce platform that is already readily available, and maybe a bigger business would want to do their own e-commerce site, and that would also include some of the different things that you would want to do, whether you'd be looking at different integration, different technology that you would be tapping or pretty much putting into your e-commerce business, so that you can plug in and communicate with your customer. You can definitely transform all of those interests into money for you. So, I mean, everything really comes down to the cash. I find that if it is that you're looking at just starting a small company, you could have a investment of possibly around $3,000, or it could climb higher. Just depends on the time and effort that you're willing to put into your e-commerce business that would help you to get the most out of it.
So you mentioned the sizes of businesses and how they will factor into the decision-making process. You also mentioned, an average cost of around $3,000 to set up an e-commerce platform. Is there really a need to set up your own e-commerce platform when there are sites like Amazon where you can conduct business? Do you see a need for businesses to go into setting up their own e-commerce platform?
That's an interesting question, but I do believe that there is always a need to have your own. We know that there are sites like Amazon, eBay, those would allow for an ease in getting started, and of course would offer you some cost-effective features, wonderful features that you can plug into so that you can have your business up and running. But at the end of the day, we know that having your own platform, you would have the power to determine how your e-commerce business would operate without possible fine print or restrictions or possible changes in costs that may impact your growth. So you can start out utilizing some of the platforms that are readily available, but it's always recommended that at the end of the day, your goal should be having your own e-commerce site.
Right, and I don't want to make enemies at Amazon, so let's use Shopify for this next question as the example, right? But do you see a need for a regional e-commerce facilitator?
Well, I do see a need for it. I believe yes. That's the simple answer. And what we see though is that every month we hear of new disruptors coming into the digital space. And some of these bigger companies are great, but I mean, they started from humble beginnings. When you look at a company like Amazon started selling books online, so We do have companies that are across the region who are just starting up, who are trying to create their own niche and getting into the mold of things. But to have our own in the Caribbean, absolutely, I would say definitely we would need our own Caribbean-based version of whether it's Shopify or Amazon. And we see some small players, so we're watching them keenly.
Right. And as we speak about it in reference to the Caribbean, I'm just curious to know, do you see any disadvantages to e-commerce as a business model?
Any disadvantages at this point? Not really. What I would say is that when e-commerce first came out a couple of years ago, there was a hesitance to purchase things online, and I do find there is still some hesitance to purchase goods online, but this is vastly reducing. What the hesitance really was, people wanted to actually be in that physical space, touching the actual products, being able to try on, But what has happened is that with the revolutionized digital transformation, we see that more e-commerce businesses are creating that confidence in buyers. So at this point, less people are hesitant to purchase online. There was also the perception that e-commerce did not work on mobile platforms. And we do know that most individuals now, up to 80, 90% of the individuals who do transaction or even browse, they do that through their mobile phones. And so having that perception that e-commerce didn't work on the mobile platforms, that was concerning. But of course, that has also changed. We found that a lot more companies are ensuring that their e-commerce business is mobile optimized online. And so people are now trusting mobile devices to, purchase online, and they do it pretty much on the go.
Tonette, I think this has been some really valuable information, and I know you've convinced me, and I'm sure we've convinced some of our viewers as well. But tell me, what tip would you have, or tips, for the viewers who've heard this conversation and want to start out their own e-commerce model?
Okay, so in terms of my tips, I would say that you only get one first impression. So definitely you want to make your first impression count. So make sure that your platform is tried and tested. Use friends and family. If you're a small business just starting up, use them. See how the user journey would fit with your customers. You do not want to be spending a fortune, to set up, and it definitely doesn't work for you. So user journey is everything with your e-commerce business. So ensure that process is very seamless. You also want to ensure that you have a solid plan and a promotional strategy. Don't just go live and expect that the sales are going to just start landing. You have to think about your approach. You have to think about who it is that you're targeting. You have to find that way to make people get just as excited about your e-commerce business as you are. And finally, I would say that you need to align yourself with experts in the field if it is that you are not familiar with e-commerce and how you can grow your e-commerce business. You can align yourself with experts like Trend who will help you to, ensure that your e-commerce business achieve its goal. E-commerce is growing, and it's growing exponentially. And there are many opportunities that are in the online space. So that's my tip. Don't get left behind.
Tonette, thank you so much. This has been a massively helpful and insightful discussion, and I know our viewers would appreciate it. Thank you for imparting your knowledge here.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me.
Unfortunately, we have to leave it there for today. But before we go, I want to take a moment to say a big thank you to Tonette and Chris for taking the time to speak with us. Thank you. And thanks again to you, our viewers. We hope you've enjoyed this month's episode of Ahead of the Curve Business Talks. And I'll see you back here next month for our next information-packed installment. Thanks again for tuning in to today's show. See you soon as we continue Ahead of the Curve Business Talks.